Welcome to this Sunday evening service of First Baptist Church in Lucedale, Mississippi. I'm so thankful the Lord has given me the opportunity to share with you, and I'm praying that God would use these messages on soul rest to help you take a step forward in your Christian life, or to help you recover from some spiritual failure or some spiritual fatigue that has come into your life. This is the next session of Experiencing Soul Rest. Last week we began looking at some specific sets of spiritual disciplines. The disciplines lead us to the feet of Jesus. These are simply things that we do in the Christian life to approach the Lord. Things like Bible reading and prayer. Today, the next set of spiritual disciplines that I would like to talk to you about are the disciplines of solitude and silence. Those maybe are not things that you've thought about or even ever tried to practice, but they are things that Jesus told us to build into our lives. Let me give you a specific situation from the New Testament. In the 6th chapter of Mark, verse 31, Jesus said to his disciples, "Come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest a while. For there were many coming and going, and they didn't even have time to eat." That's the invitation that Jesus gave to his disciples. He called them apart from the activity of ministry. He called them out of the ebb and flow of their everyday life. He called them away from the time restraints of their to-do list to a place where they could be still and find rest. I love the way Vance Havner spoke of this verse. Vance Havner was an evangelist of days gone by. Vance Havner would always say, "If you don't come apart, you will come apart." And it is so true. Of course, the call to rest is always a call to come to Jesus. A nap is not restful if the mind and heart fail to find rest in God. The kind of rest that Jesus invites us to is the kind of rest that restores the soul. The rest his disciples needed couldn't be found in the middle of the hum of everyday life. It could only be found in a secluded place. Now, what is a secluded place? Well, it's interesting that the word secluded means solitary, lonely, desolate, and uninhabited. Such is the world of solitude. It is a place alone with God. It is a place where the only distraction is the sound of God's voice. Therefore, true solitude is a place of silence, for only when the myriad voices clamoring for the soul's attention are silent can we hear the whisper of God's voice. God's invitation to David in Psalm 46:10 was, "Cease striving and know that I am God." Only in solitude can the soul truly be still and know. I really thought I understood solitude. After all, as a pastor, I experienced my fair share of time shut up with a book in a quiet place. However, that kind of solitude and silence doesn't end in soul rest. In reality, that kind of solitude for me only served to compound my weariness, because I am more tired after a day of study than I would be after a day of hard work outside. My wife can tell when I'm taxed by my time alone. My voice is weak, my brow is heavy, and I'm not very good company. My time of self-imposed solitude of study would often be combined and accompanied by worship music. The music served two purposes. It helped me keep my attention on the task at hand. It also drowned out the outside noises that might distract me from my work. Solitude, for me, was never silent, and it was always busy. The more work I could accomplish in my extended time of solitude, the better. True solitude is a retreat into God's presence. It's time alone with Him. It's given to Him to use as He sees fit in our lives. We leave all our to-do lists behind. We leave behind the expectations of others. And in solitude, we make ourselves aware only of the expectations of God. Solitude is a block of time given to God for Him to speak to us about our own lives and our relationship with Him. So most of us hate solitude. We love being alone. And what's the difference? Well, when I'm alone, I can occupy myself with washing my car, mowing my grass, watching television, doing housework, exercise, or some other activity that occupies my mind. But true solitude is the abandonment of all activity, so the mind has nothing to occupy it except thoughts of self and thoughts of God. The unoccupied mind must face the truth. There is no escape from self. Dallas Willard, in his book, The Spirit of the Disciplines, describes the extreme discomfort of solitude. He says, solitude is the most radical of the disciplines for life in the Spirit. In penal institutions, solitary confinement is used to break the strongest of wills. It is capable of this because it excludes interactions with others upon which the fallen human personality depends. The life alienated from God collapses when it is deprived of its support from the sin-laden world. But the life in tune with God is actually nurtured by time spent alone. So how difficult is it to be alone before God? Well, in solitude, the soul is naked. Robert Mulholland describes the uncomfortable nature of solitude. He explains that solitude is coming face to face with the kind of person we are in the depths of our being. It is seeing the depths of our grasping, manipulative, self-indulgent behavior. It is facing the brokenness, the darkness, the uncleanness that is within. It is acknowledging our personal bondages, our false securities, and naming ourselves to God as that kind of person. Dallas Willard insists that true solitude is so soul-shaking that we can only survive by clinging to Christ. Kenneth Boa also warns about the difficulty of genuine solitude. He writes, extended time spent in solitude can be frightening since it removes our external props and forces us to confront ourselves. Such times make us uncomfortably vulnerable before God, but this is as it should be, since this process drives us to the grace, forgiveness, and love of Christ. Reggie McNeil, in his book, Practicing Greatness, believes the discipline of solitude is absolutely essential to the life of the spiritual leader. He believes that leaders who achieve greatness in the spiritual world not only endure aloneness, they build it into their lives. In his book, The Divine Conspiracy, Dallas Willard points out the importance that Jesus placed on times of solitude, and he says, it was an important day in my life when I at last understood that if Jesus needed 40 days in the wilderness at one point in his life, I could very likely use 3 or 4 alone with God in my own life. In his book, The Great Omission, Willard says, solitude well practiced will break the power of busyness, haste, isolation, and loneliness. You will find that the world is not on your shoulders after all. You will find yourself and you will find God in new ways. Joy and peace will begin to bubble up within you and arrive from the things and events around you. Prayer and praise will come to you and from within you. With practice, the soul anchor established in solitude will remain solid when you return to your ordinary life with others. Nothing like solitude makes us aware of that experience that God wanted us to know when he spoke to David in Psalm 46:10, that verse we mentioned earlier, when he said, I want you to be still and know that I am God. That's not depending on anything that you can do. It's just simply trusting in God, being still and quiet for an hour of time, for 3 hours time, for a day's time. Jesus, for 40 days, just simply trusting God to take care of your world. One pastor who discovered the difference, the disciplines of silence and solitude made in his life confessed, as I have slowed my life down through silence and solitude, I have discovered both the wickedness hidden by a hurried life, as well as the wonder and delight my Father has in me. Look, solitude is to surrender of all of our concerns to God. We're trusting him to deal with our problems and with our difficulties. And it's in solitude that we're able to give all of those things up to him. Henri Nouwen calls solitude the furnace of transformation. And in his book, The Way of the Heart, he writes, in solitude, I get rid of my scaffolding. No friends to talk with, no telephone calls to make, no meetings to attend, no music to entertain, no books to distract me, just me, naked, vulnerable, weak, sinful, depraved, broken, nothing. It is this nothing that I have to face in my solitude, a nothingness so dreadful that everything in me wants to run to my friends, my work, my distractions, so that I can forget my nothingness and make myself believe that I'm worth something. But he reminds us that our primary task in solitude is not to pay attention to the many faces and many worries and many problems that assail us, but to keep our eyes and our heart on Christ. Solitude, he says, leads to the awareness of the dead person that lives in my house and keeps me from making judgments about other people and their sin. Solitude means more than withdrawing from others. It requires a retreat from the noise of life that deafens the leader to the voice of God. In his book, The Deeper Journey, Robert Mulholland says, the frenetic busyness and attractions and diversions of our world draw us out of the deep center of our being and spread us thinly across the surface of our life. We are assaulted every waking moment by an incessant barrage of visual, oral, and physical stimuli that compete for our attention and entice or demand our loyalty. Our lives become fragmented, our focus distorted, and our minds and emotions a swirling chaos of clashing currents. If I am to encounter God in solitude, that season of solitude must be accompanied by silence. Even music that might have devotional value at other moments, in solitude is out of place, because in solitude, I don't want anybody else's thoughts to intrude on the thoughts that God wants to place in my heart and my mind. So silence in solitude clears the static of the world and tunes the soul toward God. In Habakkuk 2, verse 20, there's a verse that we even used to sing in church. It said simply, the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silent before him. So solitude is not the place for me to be listening to other voices. It is not really the place for God to hear from me. It's the place where I tune my heart to God and be quiet and still so that he can speak. During the time that Eastern Europe was under communist control, a Romanian pastor found himself arrested and for baptizing converts. The police punished him by shutting him in a dark room all alone, and he was there for a significant number of hours. When the police returned to see if he learned his lesson, this pastor, Joseph Stefanuts, he thanked them. He said, I want to thank you for keeping me in this room. And they were amazed that he was thanking them for putting him in dark solitude. And he told them that during that time, they had given him the privilege of spending time with his Lord. Having shared these things with you, I think you can see that very few of us have truly answered the call that Jesus gave to us in Mark. He also gave to his disciples when he said, come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest a while. Until we do, we will fall short of the feet of Jesus. There alone can we find soul rest. Listen to what Jesus promised to his followers who practiced the discipline of solitude. In Matthew chapter 10, verse 27, he said, what I tell you in darkness, speak in the light, and what you hear whispered in your ear, proclaim upon the housetops. There are some special things that God wants to say to you and do in you that can only be done through an extended period of solitude and silence, where in a solitary place, alone with God, you can hear his voice as he speaks. It's a still small voice. So you need to be still and know that he's God. Please give the Lord some time to speak to you. Just set aside a time maybe to go into a room of your house all alone, or maybe if you're a man, walk out into the woods and where you enjoy the outdoors, but don't take a gun with you. Don't take any to-do list with you. Go there and be alone with God. One of my friends who knew the Lord in a special way, his name was Ernie Dice. I've told you a little bit about Ernie before. He wrote the book, God, If You're Real, Let the Cow Be in the Pen When I Get Home. I know that's an odd title, but it's a great book. Brother Ernie used to go out to a pine tree he had on his land, and that pine tree would be his place to meet with the Lord. He said the Lord would speak to him as he just went and sat under that pine tree, just him alone with God, nothing to do. And he had always had plenty of things to do, but that would be his time of solitude and silence, the place where he would go to be still and know. Find yourself a place like that. Let the Lord speak to you, and you will be amazed that the rest that comes not only to your body, but to your mind and your heart and your soul. For in solitude, you will make a way to the feet of Jesus. Thank you so much for listening.